This is Advisor 3.0, a show designed to help you as a financial advisor elevate your professional practice, transform your clients' lives, and take your business to the next level. I am Abraham Okusanya. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. My guest today is Ed Dymott, who is the CEO of Benchmark. Ed and I have known each other for a while now. There is a lot we agree on, but probably more that we disagree
as well. Yeah.
That we disagree on. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So nice to be here.
All right, so you are very well known in the business to financial advisor and others within the profession, but take us back to the journey that took you to, where we are today, CEO of Benchmark.
Wow. Okay. So 26 years in the industry, always been in wealth or technology. So pretty much my entire career, but most of my career, 17 years of the 26 years were spent at Fidelity. I guess if you go back, and this feels quite familiar actually in some ways. So when you talk about new advice models, disruption of technology, that feels familiar today versus it did 26 years ago. So look, I started my career at Fidelity when they were starting to launch their investment platform. That was all about making advisors' lives super productive, super efficient. I guess then, you'll go back that time, platforms were quite immature at that point.
Yeah.
Only in infancy. And so look, I spent most of my career at Fidelity doing that. Spent a couple of years at the Dutch insurance company Aegon, also on platforms, a bit of time in the private equity space as a consultant, working on a number of different wealth technology businesses. And then I joined Benchmark 5 years ago, initially as MD, and then 2.5 years ago was made CEO.
So tell us about the Benchmark business. Sometimes I try to get my head around the business. There's the advice business, there is the platform, there's the best practice, the network.
Yeah, of course, definitely. So think about the simple definition of the proposition. I would say that we're a financial planning business. We're 35 billion of client assets. The advisors that we work with look after about 35 billion of client assets in totality. What we really do as a proposition is we are a business in a box for a financial planner. So we provide the technology they need, the regulatory support, the compliance oversight, access to practice management support, financing, the products and solutions they want. So everything a financial planner wants in one place. And it doesn't matter if you want to run your own firm and you want to be an independent partner with us, a sole practitioner, so you want to go alone, or you want a job when you want to be employed. Really what we're doing is provide a consistent turnkey solution to all those advisors. I guess the other part to what we do is, for those advisors that want to go deep and take everything, investment management, investment platforms, pensions, look, we can do that front to back. But we also allow independent advisors to thrive. So if you want to be whole of market and completely independent, absolutely, we will support that. I guess the other thing that we are is that we also provide succession planning as well to advisors. So those advisors, especially those advisors that work with us today, really giving them a point where we can help them start up in the first place. We can help them run more efficiently. But also when it comes to exit planning, we provide an exit path for them. And if you look at that, we've bought out about 65 businesses over the history of Benchmark. We probably buy a business every 10 weeks or so. Almost all of those businesses have been on that journey with us. They've started with us. They've embraced the service. And when it comes to exit planning, as much as they have a choice of where they can go, in the main, almost every firm that we work with ends up coming on that journey and rolling into our employed division.
That's fascinating. So you do one acquisition every...
About 10 weeks or so.
Every 10 weeks. So that's like what you would do, 12, maybe 10 a year?
At least, yeah.
Right. And you don't like the term consolidator. You've told me that before. You said that before. What's wrong with that term?
Well, I think... So we want all advisors to be able to thrive with us. So our game is not just about buying out advice businesses. Mm-hmm. So it's a facet of what we do. But actually, the vast majority of what we do is we help independent businesses thrive. So we love taking an advisor who maybe hasn't grown as fast as they wanted to, or maybe frustrated with technology, or the overhead of having to manage their regulatory compliance agenda. Our starting point is to allow independent businesses to thrive, be more productive, help really focus on the things that matter, And then ultimately, if they grow, we grow off the back of that. And ultimately, if that means at the end of that journey, they go, do you know what, it's been such a happy home at Benchmark, why don't we, when it comes to sell, why don't we sell to Benchmark? That's absolutely part of the proposition. But that's not the only sort of thing that we do. Really working with all forms of advisors to help them thrive and grow. That's what we're here to do. And that is the Benchmark sort of story, really. And there's some great examples here as well. So a case study I love to use, we have a fantastic financial planner who works on the South Coast, sole financial planner. When he came to us a few years ago, he said he'd maxed out. He said he can't take any more clients on, had no appetite to grow. And actually his starting point was, do you know what, Benchmark, actually, why don't I sell to you? How about you buy out my business and, I'll go and retire, we'll do something completely different. Actually, we said, why don't we work with you? Why don't we help you with your technology? Let's help you focus. Let's help take some of the heavy lifting around some of your day-to-day regulatory processes. That business now is 5 times the size in revenue. It's 3-4 times the size in number of assets, dealing with twice as many clients. Almost the support that business needs. That's probably the only better feedback we get is they've had to put a little bit of support. Maybe I think it's a person a couple of days a week. Beyond that, that business has gone from something which is interesting, probably quite average in the IFA market, to something which is absolutely at the top end of how a financial planner would work. We love those types of case studies, and we have gotten a large number of our advisors have gone through that similar path with us as well.
So we've seen this pace of, consolidation, in the wider financial advice, business. What do you think is driving this? And on the other side, you've seen, rising maybe advisors who want to go self-employed. How are you thinking about these trends?
Well, if I talk. So maybe if I start with describing the trends and what's driving that versus, I guess, where I see the market going, because I think we look at those in 2 lenses, really. So look, clearly, it's a well understood fact that there is a aging population of advisors, people are hitting retirement age, there's a large number of smaller practices, and therefore there is a natural supply-demand economics, which is going to be the fact that there are going to be businesses that are looking for being bought out. That has driven a lot of that activity. That coupled with the weight of private equity market money, because clearly private equity investors, as you will know, are pretty smart individuals. They see these trends, they back them with capital. There's an awful lot of capital in this market. So that's driving the supply. The demand is coming from retirement advisors. And those two things are sort of coming together. However, I think what is fascinating, though, and you see this through some of the data, for every business that's being bought, there's one being born at the same time as well.
Yeah.
And, that old phrase of sort of Polly put the kettle on, then you put it on again. This is happening at scale. And I think what you're starting to see is that breakaway trend is one of the things that we believe is going to transform, again, the market over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. That doesn't mean that there's not continued consolidation, but it also means that this market does not remain fragmented. And so part of the going forward view that we take, and we can come on to breakaways, which I know is a topic we do agree on. One of the things that I think will drive the breakaway market is really the power of the individual advisor, their ability to deploy their professional services skills. It's probably as easy as it is as ever been before to move from practice to practice. And I think one of the things that is driving that is how many businesses have been sold where the process has been quick. The firms have been getting to know each other, and whereby maybe the principal or the main shareholder of the business is the one that's ultimately taken the economic value.
Right, yeah.
And the underlying advisors who ultimately run the client relationships may have not participated in that value. They may have not had a choice about the destination that they're very unlikely to have a choice about the destination they want to head.
Yeah, right.
If I'm not happy with that destination, then at some point that is going to change. And therefore, that is part of what is fueling the breakaway segment.
Yeah, I guess what you tend to see, I mean, you would know more about this than I do, which is like, say you have a firm with a principal and, 3 other advisor. The principal sells, stays, hang around for, say, 2-3 years for the earn out. And then you have the advisors, as you said, who haven't participated in the economic, upside, who will, make a decision whether they stay in the current structure or they...
And that's absolutely the case. So there's two drivers we see in the breakaway market. There's one which is the post-exit and the post-earn-out phase in the private equity-backed consolidation.
Right.
If you've not done a good job on integration, delivering a really good advisor value proposition, those advisors, there is a high risk that they will look elsewhere as part of that. That is part of what's happening now. And we've seen that where we've taken advisors and even offices out of some of the consolidators. That has been a trend whereby people will look and say, do you know what, this is not the right place for me. The second thing, which I think is fascinating, actually starts to open up a whole new market for financial planners. We also do a lot in the private banking and top end of the wealth management space, whereby some of the higher end advisors are going through the same trend as well, whereby, if I was sat in a large scale private bank, at my retirement, maybe I might get a gold watch or maybe a nice lunch, etc. Actually, if I run great value client relationships, my clients are loyal to me, and actually as a professional, I'm thinking about how do I build and actually get value from my own equity. There's a very common story that we're starting to see, and we're taking quite a lot of advisors out of some of those top-end private banks and wealth managers now, and that is all about how do they create their own succession retirement plans, and more often than not, they're coming from employed roles.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I've seen fewer examples of those, so which is fascinating. But how does a team or an advisor within, I don't know, I'm going to pick a name, Credit Suisse, take a bank of clients and go independent? I imagine it's a lot harder than in the independent space because the asset is captive. There is greater product range in terms of there might be credit or debt, as well as, wealth management, investment management. How are you seeing that trend?
To again, pull back in terms of what is driving that underlying trend. So historically, that 1 to 10 million space has been very investment management led.
Right.
So it's been led with the discretionary investment solution or some investment vehicles being the starting point.
Yeah.
What's happening now is that's completely turned on its head. It's now a planning led market where the planning takes the fore and investment management comes secondary. So if you've got strong client relationships, they want to have a planning led relationship. What we're seeing is the first thing that happens is that relationship is almost being turned on its head to become planning first. Then actually, when you start to construct your business model around financial planning, the investment management part, which is historically what a lot of these firms have been doing, becomes secondary in nature. Then ultimately, and clearly every individual who makes this switch, they have to do things within their employment terms and contracts and restrictions, and they always do that. But if they have that mindset of wanting to create their own business, their own practice, what they are doing is they will step out, they'll create their own practice, and ultimately it's quite interesting to see how many clients may follow them once they're up and running and able to engage with them. And actually a lot of this is because it's a planning-led relationship, which the client actually values far more than maybe the traditional investment management approach.
Interesting. So then when you see this breakaway move, either from the top end of the market or indeed, from consolidators, what are you seeing in terms of where the advisors are going? Because often what my sense from talking to advisors is they're not going directly authorized, and they are going into a network that provides some sort of regulatory umbrella.
Exactly.
Double click into that trend a little bit. Why does a firm come to you versus? So
it doesn't matter where you're breaking away from, whether you're employed, whether you're part of an independent firm. Generally, if you think about where you're starting from, you're used to having that infrastructure given to you.
Yes.
So that's provided within whichever structure you're in today. They'll provide you the technology stack, the tools you need, the regulatory cover, all the reporting. You don't have to worry about the corporate governance of how your company works properly unless you're the business owner. I guess what we do, we provide that front to back, everything in one place. Anything from the practice management software you need, access to products, how you template all the things you need to run a practice. We'll get you regulated. We'll sort your PI cover. So you think about the list of worries that you would have when you break away. The number of things that we will do for you is where we get the success, really. And so therefore, we're allowing those advisors to do what they need to do to thrive, and we'll do the heavy lifting. And that's not just for the breakaways. That's for any advisor that we work with. That is the value proposition. We'll give you the scale at the back end to let you thrive at the front end. And if you talk to any one of our advisors, and look, we're blessed with having some fantastic advisors that we work with, our advisors, if you look at them versus the market, they grow faster. They spend more time on client activities. I like to think they're happier as well, but that's more qualitative than anything else. But generally, the things that ultimately, they add value, and they can destroy value if you don't get them right. But they have a management distraction, and ultimately, if you're going to grow your franchise, focus the efforts on those things that are distinct, are going to add value, are going to manage client relationships, drive the top line, and let a firm like Benchmark do the things at the back end of your business that gives you scale and efficiency.
Sounds like a dream.
Exactly.
Okay. Also sounds like a vertical integrated model. Talk to me about that. If an advisor says, okay, if I come to Benchmark, you provide the regulatory cover and the technology stack that I need, and let me focus on my business. But also, do I have to, or use your platform or the investment solution? How do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. So look, we are absolutely focused on letting independent businesses thrive. So look, we have the most independent businesses that you can look at in the market who are working with us today. But also, unashamedly, look, we do have our own in-house investment management platform solutions that people can use in totality. I think what makes us different is where some of our peers have maybe gone completely restricted, and that's your only choice. You can't go outside of those guardrails. We allow choice, and therefore we compete on one main thing. Our products are of great value. So with standalone, they provide good value for money in their own right. So you look at our platform or investment management solutions, they are as equivalent and fairly priced as others. That's not consistent with every one of our peers, where sometimes, not naming names, Abraham, that would be, but you could work out who I'm referring to. But where some of our peers are charging maybe twice as much as the market rates for our services, our platform is equivalent to the market rate that you would expect to see for a platform. Our investment solution is exactly the same. So that's the first thing, is good value for money. Second thing is those products and services that are absolutely, from an ease of use, productivity, they're more connected, more integrated. And that does mean that an advisor who's using those services and wants to use those services, they'll be productive anyway with us, but can be even more productive by using our in-house products and services. And that is the interplay. And I think that's the right way of doing vertical integration.
Where do you see more growth? Do you see more growth in the independent side of things versus, firms who, an employed advisor might say, I'm going to join Benchmark as a and take the full VAT. Where's the growth?
Well, you know what? This is not meant to sound too confident, but actually we're really positive, whereby we're blessed with really good organic growth. So some of our employed teams and divisions are doing absolutely market-leading organic growth rates, which is a fantastic place to be. We're also seeing some really good, strong growth with our independent channels. I think there's a different way of answering your question around our strategy and our belief over the next few years. Look, we look over the next 5 years or so, this is an advisor-led growth market. So where we believe businesses will grow and thrive is by attracting advisors into their model at scale, providing the best place, the most productive tools and services to make an advisor thrive. And that's what is going to drive this market. So being able to provide a great home for financial planners is our starting point. And that's what's driving most of our growth at the moment.
Let's talk about technology and AI.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that right now? There's been a lot of talk about, AI, eating advisors' lunches, if you like. How do you come at that?
Well, I think I might take it in two parts. I might talk about technology and then how do we look at AI as well. So technology, look, we we're very focused on building proprietary technology solutions within Benchmark. So out of the 700 people or so I have around about 100 people working on building proprietary technology solutions. So there's a big investment. The next few years, we are spending tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds on technology. And so that is a cornerstone of what we do. And we do think proprietary technology, driving unique experiences is really important. There's a huge focus on how you use technology to drive better advisor productivity. So for the next few years, actually the next 2 years, we believe we can take about 6.5 hours per client, per advisor out of the advice process, which will give an advisor about 50% more client capacity and require probably half the support they need today. That, we think, unlocks an awful lot of growth potential. It also potentially unlocks different dynamics about how do you support things such as retirement advisors in a different way. When it comes to AI, I thought it was fascinating. The CEO of Anthropic came through last week to say he thought that actually financial planning was almost going to be one of the last bastions to ever be disrupted by AI. I think that is very interesting when you think, if someone like Anthropic, who has got a vested interest in being as disruptive as possible to as many industries, is saying that they believe financial planning is one of the last areas that they think will get disrupted, I think that starts to show that advisors shouldn't have too much to worry about in the long term. However, I do think the mechanical part of financial planning, we think about 80% of the friction can come out of that part of the process. And what it will do, though, is AI as a copilot, it will free up advisors' capacity to actually drive more front-end client value. And we think that is great for financial planners and great actually for the profession as a whole as well.
Do you think that Anthropic CEO is just telling us what we want to hear?
But it's in his interest to do so, really. I generally would say, look, it's not in his interest to say that, is it? Yeah. And I do believe, and I think we've done a lot of work, and we did some work with the consultancy firm Boring Money a couple of years ago on the value drivers for advice. So we looked at all the things when a client gets advice. What are the things they actually are? What do they actually value when they get advice? Not surprising. Every financial planner would tell you the same anyway, but not surprising. Trust, peace of mind, the quality of the planning and the coaching. Those elements, being there where I need someone, those real soft skills. Technology is not going to replace those elements of financial planning. I help someone make a big life choice and decision. Yeah, I might use ChatGPT to see what response. But when it comes to that, or think about my retirement, am I going to do that just in a technology only relationship? I'm not sure. And therefore, I do think AI, I would absolutely see that as being co-pilot, removing the mechanical elements of what a financial planner needs to do. And it frees up for those value-added coaching and guidance type conversations.
What about all this conversation about cost, price compression? This idea that I don't know where advice sits overall in your ecosystem today, but let's say it's 75 basis points, 70 basis point. There's all this talk about, the client will not want to. If you truly compress admin mechanical side of things by 80%, then do you see a world where price of advice compresses?
Well, so that I think how many times in the last decade have we had a conversation about advice fees? So, go back to 2012, post-RDR. That was almost, was it the death of the advisor at that point?
Yes.
What happened to advice fees? They went up.
Yeah.
What's happened post-consumer duty? I think at most they probably leveled. I've not seen much evidence of reductions. And actually, again, when we do test this a lot within our business, across all the advisors that we work with, we don't see much pressure today on advice fees. We see lots of pressure and discussion on platform fees, investment management fees. So they're sort of parts of the supply chain. There's a lot of squeezing happening there. But at the moment, financial planning fees seem to be pretty resilient. I think it goes back to being able to really describe the value and outcomes of what an advisor does. What value do you place on someone, on a financial planner helping someone retire 5 years earlier than they thought was possible, or hitting a goal that's, didn't feel achievable? Those are quite valuable interactions. That's what a financial planner does. And I think if you get that right, you deliver it right, then yeah, absolutely, there is still value there. If all you do is focus on the mechanical elements of what you do, that's probably going to become more commoditized. But that's not what clients come to a financial planner just for. And actually our evidence and our research shows that is actually some of the lower elements of value when people actually start to actually define what they value in terms of the relationship with the financial planner.
It's interesting. I do think we've seen a price compression, but in a different way, that advisors are expanding the range of services that they deliver to clients, but not necessarily charging more for it. So is this, do you...
Well, it's almost the sort of, if you think about why do people come to a financial planner, they lack either time, will, or skill to make financial decisions. So time, will, skill, I think is a really good way of thinking about it. Either I'm so busy in my life, I need someone else to help me. Either I can't be bothered, so I've outsourced the problem, or fundamentally there's a lack of skill. I don't think if I look at those things, we're all time poor.
Yeah.
No one wakes up in the morning going, do you know what? I haven't seen my financial advisor's day. So generally, this is a low will market, and fundamentally skill. There's nothing really that's going to drive, especially in the next 5 to 10 years, fundamental changes in people, in the financial competency of people. That ultimately, I believe, will mean that financial planners continue to play a pretty key role. So lack of time, will, skill is definitely going to play out. And therefore, I can see this constant demand for professional support. And those life choices, which are sometimes once in your lifetime choices, I believe absolutely that technology can play a massive role, and it will enable better accessibility than ever before. But I don't believe it's going to replace the financial planner. But I do believe if you go back to that holistic nature of a financial planner does, and those sort of life goal type skills, that inevitably means that you start to broaden out the types of conversations and the support that you have. And you can almost start to see a world where financial planning almost becomes family office-like in some of the services. And so definitely you can see how that would be the next evolution of financial planning as a profession.
It's interesting. We actually do agree on that evolution. I saw some stats by my friend Michael Kitses just from this is based on the US market, essentially saying something like 50% of advisors don't expect any changes to their fees in the next year or so. There's about 40% of advisors who actually expect to put their price up. So it's like, in spite of all these conversations about AI and things, advisors seem confident in their own value proposition. I mean, maybe we're just all deluded.
Possibly, but I think I go back to this point of, if you're going to make a fundamental life choice and decision, ChatGPT is not going to ensure against the inaccuracy of that. So unless ChatGPT is 100% foolproof, and actually if you experiment today, it comes out with some interesting and curious answers. But if you were thinking about your next phase of what you do in your life, and you wanted professional opinion that was going to underpin that, ChatGPT is not going to underwrite that.
Yeah, but it's also like, to your point, there is I would argue there is premium on human relationship. There is value in saying, I'm going to stop work for the last, I'm going to stop work, or I am going to someone who wants to sell their business, or maybe getting divorced and whatever, need reassurance that they're going to be okay, and that often comes by looking at another human being.
100%, but also I wouldn't underestimate the power of that regulatory banner here as well. So not only is a human relationship which is trusted, but it's also got, for want of a better word, a level of regulatory wraparound that says, and I'm doing this in a way that if what I give you is not right, you have the ability to come back and complain, and ultimately with recourse. That has some power to it. Yeah. I think the other thing which is really important, which I go back to the fundamentals of big life decisions, and I'll use a couple of examples. So for most people making life decisions, it might be the only time that they make that decision in that life.
Right.
So think about retirement. Some people try and retire once or twice or 3 times.
Unsuccessfully.
Exactly. But most people only choose to try and retire once. if you're a financial planner, you've seen hundreds of people making that decision. We've got some very specialist firms that all they might do is take one specialism. It's like an example. We've got a couple of firms that just do dental and medical professionals. So dentists, great example, follow the same path. They all go through the same thing. They're all self-employed. They all run their own practices. They all get to an age where they don't want to be dentists anymore. They all sell their business. For that dentist, that should be a relatively unique experience. If you're a financial planner and all you do is help people on that journey, you would have seen this hundreds of times. You'll know the process. You'll know the decision making. You'll know the
tools.
And so that bringing that benefit of scale and being able to, in some cases where you've got those niches, allowing a financial planner to scale their niche, I think is a really interesting sort of thread as well.
So let's look out over the next, I don't know, 5 years. Where do you see the industry land in terms of, consolidator, independent firms? We've seen, quite a pace in the last few years. Do we get firms who are just bigger and bigger? What is the fate of smaller independent firms?
So look, I get asked this question a lot, and I always use the same parallel, which I look at other professional services markets, and I think that's probably the best proxy. So I do think one of the most exciting things about financial planning is how the profession professionalizes over the next 5 to 10 years. And can it be as akin to accountancy or law or medicine with the same sort of model? Therefore, if you play out, and let's look at accountancy, it's a great example. Do you have big consolidated accountancy practices? Absolutely. Do you have small, thriving small local practices? Yes. Does that draw parallels to how a financial planning world could evolve? Absolutely. However, what I think is interesting, and I think to turn it full circles, this also drives in my mind the breakaway advisor trend. If you were to look at the large practices versus small practices versus being employed or self-employed, actually, if you look at those other professional services markets, the current dislocation about how I earn as an advisor does not exist as much in those markets. So if I work as an accountant, an auditor at EY, and I choose to do my own local thing, that's probably not just a pure play economic thing. In fact, in some ways, I might make more money in the big firm than I would small. What's driving it? Lifestyle. It might be that I want to create something in my own vision. But actually, the economics look somewhat different. At the moment, what's happening in some firms is I might be in a very large firm, but the economic reward of going off and doing my own thing could be too great. And I think that is going to become a leveling over that period. And so when I think about the outlook, I would look and say the professionalization of financial planning as a profession is going to be a major trend. And therefore, when you start to look at how the market might unfold, what I believe then you start to have, and I think this is where we also will have a good discussion, you get these ecosystem players that will provide the tools, technology, and service that a financial planner needs to thrive. That could be they do it under some sort of national branded employee division. It could be that you provide these business-in-a-box technology solutions. I think they're all a continuation which really allows a financial planner to deploy their professional services skills in whichever manner they choose.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking, is this SJPification of everything? So, SJP, I know you don't, I'm the one naming names, okay. But, they could argue that, within our large structure, we have not independent, but we have smaller businesses within that. Of course, they buy into the ecosystem, the technology and products that we've created. You could come to a benchmark world where, we have our own products if you want to use them, but you have independence in terms of what you can do. We provide the platform, we provide the technology. And then you have on the one end the directly authorized firms who are, doing their own thing. So you could have all that. The challenge is that people would say the regulator prefers the larger, perhaps more vertically integrated firms.
Yeah, so look, I don't know much if the regulator would ever say that loud, but I guess what you've seen, and you've seen this change already. So the last few years, what have they done with the network models? There's been this appointed regime changes,
yes,
which have put much more scrutiny over how the networks operate, how they oversee the firms, etc. So that's part of that dynamic about can they make sure they get as much control over the market as possible. Doesn't mean it's small independent DA firms can't thrive. However, I think that ecosystem will still play out. So how many people might use their practice management system to be their ecosystem play? And that's the thing that allows them to thrive. Some people might work with a high-quality MPS provider with some technology being wrapped around. That could be their ecosystem play as well. And some people might use a benchmark-type business model or an SJP to do so. I think they are all a continuation of the same sort of thought process.
Interesting.
I think St James's Place, I think this might be sacrilegious to say, there were many things that business has not done right over the years. Actually, in some ways, there's many things that it has done well. So it's provided a really great home for a large number of financial planners. It's driven, new talent through the market. It's looking after an enormous number of clients. The advice, look, this may be a comment, but again, I think actually, the advice generally is, I think it's been okay. I think the things that hasn't done quite so well are it's completely restricted and it's very hard for an advisor to have choice. I think those are things where, I think if I look at that business model, I would say, look, that's the things when I look at what we're doing, we're trying to do that differently. We don't want to lock people into a business model, and we think choice and independence are important. But look, there are lots of things that SJP and others that I go, do you know what? They have helped the profession over the last 10 years, and they continue to.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. The thing I keep coming back to with the consolidator model, the larger, bigger firms employing, for the most part, having employed advisor, is that as far as pay and compensation is concerned, it's probably the same as being a smaller owner-managed firms.
I don't think it is actually.
Tell me more.
No, so I think this is part of what is driving that dynamic.
Right.
So look, I think that, and again, we can go deeper on consolidators as well. So
I've got all day. Go.
Yes. So the consolidation model of the old has, I think, now started to fail. What do I mean by that? The idea that you can buy out IFA practices at 7 times profit and sell the whole thing at 15 times and not do very much in between. I think if you look at some of the challenges over the last few years on some of those models, I think that hypothesis is now proven to be to not be correct. You have to do something in between that really drives engagement in your offering, connects clients to that business, and ultimately creates an advisor value proposition that is going to sustain. And what do I mean by that? Is advisors, beyond whatever period that they join those firms, they've got to look and say, I believe this is the place that I can thrive and get rewarded for the long term. If not, it goes back to what we talked earlier, they are likely to break away. What we have found where we've taken advisors from some of the consolidators is pay is actually pretty low. And actually, if you compare it to some of the small regional firms, actually that's quite a marked difference. And therefore, what some of those businesses have done is kept the operating costs as low as possible to keep the profit as high as possible to try and boost ultimately the valuation of that business. And therefore, what we do see time and time again is the pay scales of some of those businesses are not as market competitive as others.
So this is music to my ears, because what I was going to say is that pay is about the same, but actually the payday, i.e. being able to build value into a owner-managed business and ultimately somehow exit it is where I see the substantive difference. But if what you're saying is true, where I pay is worse, and in 10, 15, 20 years' time, if I put in all the work, all the energy into growing the business, I don't participate in the upside as an employed advisor.
And there's two elements of that dynamic, really. So it does require a little bit more entrepreneurism if you want to have that equity upside. And therefore, that's a different mindset. And there's a bit more risk and a bit more that, that definitely stepping away from the employed role into a self-employed, that's not going to work for everyone. What we do see is people stepping out of previously employed roles and going self-employed. That can be a pure earnings difference as well, whereby we took someone out of one of the investment banks last year, came on self-employed with us, just their basic earnings are twice what they earned previously. Doing the same job, working with very similar clients.
Probably cheaper for the client overall.
Yeah,
cost.
Absolutely. And so what you're doing is the way we look at it is the pay away of the revenue and how much goes to the professional advisor. We see in some cases that can be as low as 8, 9, 10% of the revenue being generated going to the advisor. What we believe is that model is going to be 2 to 3 times that. And that is what we're starting to see play through. It
just goes back to my Cobra effect analogy, which I've said to people before, that, if you incentivize in this case, a particular behavior, you put very high premium on the value of advice, so that by buying more and more of these firms, what you do is you just create an incentive for more and more people, the entrepreneurial-minded advisor, to go out, strike out on their own, and create more firms or businesses.
And I guess the fundamentals here, and like I say, there's many private equity firms who are invested in this sector who I believe actually are doing this with the long term in mind, sustainability. But the idea that you could buy out, consolidate business at 7 times, flip the whole thing at 15 times, and not create a sustainable business model, including the sustainable economic model with your advisors, that I think is challenged.
We haven't. Would you say we have had a good example, a good example of a successful private equity backed consolidator, a good success story in terms of exit? Succession is because Succession, for instance, is the oldest one. Is that the word I'm looking for? Is the one of the first to do this. And 10 years later, did anyone make money out of the PE side of things?
Look, so again, let's not comment on too many business models. But if I was a private equity investor in True Potential, or the individuals who've just successfully exited Evelyn, I would say they probably have had a pretty good ride. And actually, irrespective of what people think about individual business models, there are interesting things that both those businesses have done. And so, look, I do think there are areas of the market where people have transformed, changed businesses. And look, if you were to look at the economics, they have successfully realised value from those businesses. But look, for every good example, there are some examples where you might say, look, there are businesses that may have found it tougher than they thought.
It's been fascinating having this conversation and taking your thoughts. So, if we were sitting here in 5 years' time, are you going to be here in 5 years' time? I'm joking. But if we're sitting here in 5 years' time, talk to me about Benchmark, talk to me about the business, what are you doing, what changes have you seen in that period? Where are you taking this?
Look, so in some ways, the business model, we think the next 5 years, our business model will look quite similar to where it does today. We continue to want to be the home for the high-quality financial planners, and we want to continue to make them thrive. And that use of technology to make them more productive than anyone else in the market, allow them to and enable them to deliver better experience and have freedom and choice in how they want to run their business. That core exists today, and I really hope in 5 years' time that's the same DNA of the business. And yeah, I'm signed up for the long term. I believe in what we're doing. I believe in the future. We're taking the right actions, and I'm excited for the next 5 years. So we'll maybe have a beard or something in 5 years. But I would. Well, hopefully it's not be 5 years when we come back. So, but I'm positive for our business. Clearly, I'm also super positive about the future for financial planners. So for all the doom mongers and all the people who think that technology is going to, eat the financial planner's lunch, I think financial planning is a profession that is going to thrive. And technology is only going to fuel more access to more people to get the financial advice they need. And I think that's exciting.
Dymott, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your
so
wisdom.
much.
Thank you for your positivity. You and I both are betting on the future of the human advisor.
Definitely. I'm never sure I'm going to be quite as positive as you, Abraham. But I think, I know we're both equally as positive. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
That's a wrap on today's show. Massive thanks to my production crew, especially Jake Osha, Melissa Canham, and the entire team. And of course, to our sponsor, Timeline, the market-leading provider of integrated planning technology and model portfolio service to advisors. I do hope you've enjoyed today's show. Head over to Apple Podcast and give us your review there. Until next time, goodbye.